Elon Musk declares that he is a cultural Christian. Another controversy rocks the Olympics in women's boxing. And apparently criticizing Marvel is off limits now. We talk about all that and more on this episode of Faith and Pop Culture. Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 22 of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined at the desk, as I always am, by the edge of your seat drama to my Olympic gold medal event, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Oh, not too much, Daniel. Just got the Olympics on full blast.
You've been enjoying the
24/7. Oh, man. The drama, as Canadians would say. But it's been fantastic. It's sort of been we wake up every morning and pretty much go straight to Olympic coverage, see what we missed, see what we can catch live. So yeah.
Has it inspired you to want to exercise? But I keep seeing these events, I could probably do that.
Yeah, it's like
how fast are those guys really going?
How hard is it? I looked up the distances for the Olympic triathlon because I've done all of one sprint triathlon before, and I was like, oh, how far is this? And it's actually not the distances aren't undoable. It's just doing them at that pace.
I saw someone posted a meme or a quote saying every Olympic event should be required to have some average dude.
Yes.
Just to give the context. You see these people running and we were watching the 200 or 400 meter. It's they don't even look like they're trying. They're just slowly jogging. But if there was someone like me out there hustling, they'd just be leaving you in the dust.
Have you seen the Olympic swimmer versus average swimmer clip?
I don't think so.
It's there's however many. It's 9 average swimmers. They all jump in, and then I think they get a half a pool length lead, and then the Olympic swimmer jumps in and beats them all, from 25 meters behind.
But they didn't have me in the pool.
That's true. They didn't have you in the pool, but it's still it's one of those things. It's I would love to see that on what's an average runner versus those who are doing the 800 meter run. Because
me and my wife were looking up their average speed that they're going for these long races is faster than I could ever even get up to.
If it was
even hit, at any point, just for a second.
I know.
And they maintain it for
Well, and even these marathon runners, their running marathon pace is faster than all probably ever be in my life.
Yeah, it's just full on sprinting.
Yeah,
and it's amazing. Again, I love the Olympics.
Speaking of amazing athleticism, I do have one thing for you. In honor of the start or the launch of your new book that you just keep droning on about every episode, I got you these special spicy dill pickle chips, sort of an homage to your brother Mike, who loves dill pickle, and I could not find the ketchup chips or all dressed, unfortunately. So
when I was working on my book,
you both have no discernment and no discerning palate, so I thought this would be an appropriate gift for such an occasion.
Because our book, which is conveniently available now wherever you get your books, Straight to the Heart, Communicating the Gospel in an Emotionally Driven Culture, in paperback, ebook, and audiobook forms. But while we were writing that, it's sort of like those that train for 4 years for the gold medal.
It is. It's a different
I was writing this in hopes that I might receive such a prize
and
not only
receive it. You have
dill pickle, but spicy dill pickle.
Spicy dill pickle.
So that definitely made it
only the best for you, Daniel.
That would go good with a side of reading my book. So I encourage you guys, go check out the book. You can find the link in the comment section, and you can do so with dill pickle chips or without, whatever is your prerogative. But one of the things that is someone's prerogative is sharing his opinion, and that is Elon Musk. I think it's no surprise that he bought a social media platform, because this guy likes to talk.
He has opinions.
This guy's going to get us to Mars, so he starts ahead in a lot of ways, and I'll listen to anyone that gets us to Mars. But he made some comments just the other day in an interview with sort of author, psychologist, public pundit, whatever you want to call him these days, Jordan Peterson, and made a very interesting, it's like a 2.5 hour interview. They cover a lot of ground in this thing, but kind of the section that seems like a lot of people like us are pulling out of that's interesting, or that, whatever your opinions on it, kind of come down to where Peterson's sort of asking him about his like religious viewpoints, or this what does he think about Christianity? And he made an interesting statement, and I think we can jump into it because in many ways I feel like it reflects a lot of just like wider mindsets we have in our culture. But Musk says this. He says, "Well, I'm not a particularly religious person. I do believe that the teachings of Jesus are good and wise. I would say I'm probably a cultural Christian. There's tremendous wisdom in turning the other cheek." And then he kind of expanded on that eventually to describe what he would call his own religious beliefs as the religion of curiosity, the religion of greater enlightenment. And just sort of the phrase cultural Christian is the one that sort of jumps right off the page or the audio file or whatever, wherever you're getting it. And it's interesting. People have opinions on that. But I feel like that, in many ways, is like a succinct way that represents a lot of what we see happening in culture today. So that cultural Christianity. What were some of because you watched some of this interview?
Yeah, I listened to a bit of it. And that is, I mean, I think, first off, it's not terribly surprising that that's sort of where he lands sort of in more or less religious beliefs. And I think it is indicative of sort of a wider trend. I think especially among people like Musk, even, people like Jordan Peterson. I'm not sure what his religious affiliation is at this point, but maybe people in that sphere of influence, I feel like a lot of them probably are some version of cultural Christian. And I think you see it play out though in I would say perhaps more negative ways, kind of downstream, which is fighting the culture wars in a more political sense. And, even talk some of what we talked about last week of how there is this conflation of Christianity with like conservatism and more right-wing political factions. And so it's interesting, but I think it can be sort of, I think, damaging to what Christianity is. And it's not surprising that someone like Musk would kind of land in this area, but it is kind of an interesting, I guess, admission from him. And I think he sees this in a very positive light, whereas I think from those within the church, when they use words like cultural Christianity, it's typically a negative thing when you're looking at the culture around you, and it's like, well, it's Christian in culture, but not really in
because I almost feel like there's almost like two, because in some ways I feel like he's using cultural Christian slightly different than like how you might use it in the Bible Belt of like I feel like there's like we live in the Bible Belt, we're in Georgia or at least south or east of the Bible Belt, and like sort of that sense that like, hey, this is a Christian country, and like there's sort of that assumption that hey, I'm kind of Christian because it's America, and there's churches every time I drive past to go.
I go to church on Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, like sort of that sense where I feel like Musk maybe falls into some of that, but like I feel like his kind of use of cultural Christian is almost like more specifically like what is the culture. Like he's not just swimming in that pool. But it is very much like I believe in that is better for our society if we operate as Christian. Don't need to be Christian.
The principles of
like the principles of Christianity are better. And I feel like something like you were saying is almost inevitable when you start sort of your viewpoints from like the negative perspective of what you're not. Like I feel like for Musk, it's a lot of, hey, well, I see what he would call the woke mind or mind virus. He sees all the stuff he doesn't like in culture, and the Christian kind of principles and some of that teaching, some of the stuff she just said is sort of different than that, and he seems as better. So he sort of latches onto that rather than starting with like, what is Christianity? Like, is Christianity just these principles, or does Christianity, need to deal with Christ? Like, do you need the, or you just have anity or whatever you take out the Christ? And I feel like that sort of that conflation of just say Christianity is just sort of this way we govern our country, and it's just like these rules that are good to live by is just so prevalent today. Like, I think even people in the church who may well, still be saved, like can fall back to that. I think that's why
Yeah.
you see so much the allure of like politics and like the need to legislate. Like we got to have the Ten Commandments in the classroom. We got to have like in Oklahoma, I got to have like the Bible is a prominent part of the like,
Yeah.
we need to like force it because Christianity is about principles, and if we don't have those principles, then we don't have Christianity. Because there was a quote, a tweet from Elon Musk, which I feel like is sort of the embodiment of, I think, why this viewpoint goes off course. This is right after what we talked about last week, the opening ceremony with the either mockery or not mockery of the Lord's Supper, where Musk tweeted out, said, "Unless there is more bravery to stand up for what is fair and right, Christianity will perish."
Bold claim.
Yeah,
Bold claim.
We survived Nero, but if that opening ceremony doesn't mean to us,
Yeah.
if then Christianity is like,
If we don't quell that rebellion, then yeah, we're done for. I think that'll be the end of Christianity as we know it.
which seems so like it seems such a shallow and like just crazy statement to think like Christianity can't. There's people in culture, like there are people in culture literally killed Jesus, and the church is still thriving. Like,
Yeah, well,
the people are like mean in culture, and not everyone like.
Yeah,
That's gonna like Christianity like perish, but it makes sense when
it does. Yeah,
if your viewpoint is Christianity is just these good principles, because if those principles are challenged, if you take away the power of Christ, like it's just teaching. If society rejects those, then Christianity ceases to exist.
Yeah. Well, I think when you look at Christianity as sort of the building blocks of the West, and it is sort of the principles to govern and to live by and good morals, etc., then I think that you end up in a place like this where if we don't eradicate sort of the woke nonsense, then we will perish, and perhaps the West will perish. But like Christianity was around like long before the West was around, and it will be long after. And so it's just it is a pretty shallow view, I think, of Christianity, and it just reduces it to these principles without any of the power or the central figure of Christianity, which is Christ himself. And so it's just this weird sort of, again, conflation of, I think, Western values with Christianity. And although there is overlap, like Western values or, conservative values or whatever, classical liberal values does not equal Christianity. And so I think but there is such a blurring of that line right now. It's hard, I think, for people to kind of separate the two.
Yeah, and I think that's even like why I would, which we talked about several episodes ago, like with something like the Ten Commandments, like why I feel like that's not effective is,
Yeah.
you can make people act Christian all you want, but like unless you have Jesus, then you're not offering. You're just offering them some principles, and like principles aren't going to save or set this country right. Like without, and I feel like in some ways this mindset becomes attractive because it's sort of like we want the benefit of the good life Jesus offered. We just don't necessarily want Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
like I feel like even guys like Richard Dawkins, who's like, as atheistic as you can get, is like, I think he's even referred to himself almost as culturally Christian. Like in the same way Musk does, of like, I think it's evil. I think it's a bunch of lies and nonsense, but I can't deny that like the society run with those principles is better than one run by other principles.
And like a life lived with those principles.
The meaning and just, all the stuff that sort of the Christianity has, brought about in society to make it flourish.
Yeah.
It's just that we want that, but like, we don't want to be like, indebted to Jesus or have to like have a new responsibility
or any recognition that you're like a sinful person who needs a savior, like, which is the thing that I think people get tripped up by, because Musk's version and maybe Dawkins' version of it is, well, you just get you do your own thing, you live, you try and live a life that lives up to these higher principles, and it's all on you and it's all in your control. And I think that's what's so attractive about it, because it's like, oh, well, I can just be a good moral person and, not kick puppies and be nice to my neighbors and be an upstanding citizen. And that's yeah, I feel great about that, and that's how I'll live my life. That's super attractive, I think, to people because it's all about you, and it's all what I can do to be this
Yeah, like
right
it puts
person.
you in charge, which why I think this is such a growing, prevalent mindset of like it gives you sort of this opportunity to stand up for these values and kind of
Yeah.
fight this war and stuff without like submitting before Christ or like having it is very like active and like, you're the one that's you got to go put this down and for I think that's why the culture war is such an attractive thing.
Yeah, well, and it puts the emphasis then on political action versus on like personal uh, personal behavior and trusting Christ to do what only He can do, and so the outworking of that sort of Christianity, I think, is very much like political activism, in whatever form that takes.
Which like to me, and again, it's way more complicated of a discussion, but like is almost more dangerous than any of the stuff that they're fighting against. Like I think,
Right.
which I think why Jesus would say, don't be lukewarm. Like it's
Yeah.
better to either be all in or all out. But where it gets messy is when it's sort of you conflate, you water down, you sort of have Christianity.
Yeah.
You just don't have the stuff that makes it Christianity. Like, I feel like that spreading to me is going to lead more people astray than like
Yeah.
very clear, even like blatant mockery or like antagonism towards the church, which like throughout history has proven doesn't make the church perish. Like
Right.
you can literally kill Christians, in mass, and the church is going to keep going.
And in fact thrive.
But I feel like the complacency of like, well, we're sort of Christian, we just don't need Jesus.
Yeah.
That to me can be more dangerous. But hey, we'd love to hear what you guys think. If you're listening to us, send us a message, or if you're watching us on YouTube, jump in the comment section. Sort of how you navigate that, because I do think that is such a pivotal discussion and question. I think like not just like right now, but like in the future for the church is going to have to wrestle with.
Yeah, for sure.
But speaking of wrestling and boxing and
Contact
fighting,
sports.
contact sports, kind of the other hot button thing. The Olympics are great when you're a podcast because like there's so much.
Yeah, it's endless.
This to talk about.
It's been so easy to organize our podcast these past 2 weeks.
Yeah, and it's just giving me an excuse to watch endless unhealthy amounts of
research.
Olympic coverage all day long. But kind of which again you're probably familiar with, even if you aren't obsessed with the Olympics, just because it's been all over social media. It's sort of this controversy that sparked in the women's boxing event. Where the 25-year-old boxer from Algeria, who I'm hoping I'm somewhat in the ballpark of pronouncing it, Amain Khalif. Does that sound Algerian pronunciation?
Maybe, or Amani.
Amani, that's probably,
I don't know.
That probably sounds better. But she was boxing and she fought, she was fighting the Italian Angelia Carini. And after like just 47 or 46 seconds, like essentially one punch to the face, the Italian like dropped out of the competition.
Yeah.
She's done. The match is over. And it became, again, people lose. Every match has a loser. And that's not in itself unusual. But this particular one became kind of a hot button conversation because of Khalif and sort of the back as people began to learn more and more about who this person is and the fact that she had previously, along with another boxer, being disqualified from a boxing competition due to some results of a test, which appeared to show, again, they haven't released the tests, but appeared to show that she did in fact have male chromosomes, which, as you can expect, like, immediately just sparked. People got.
I wonder what people would say about such
people got to their computers and sparked into action. And probably the most like prominent, at least the one I think that really brought it to like a public conversation, was Mrs. J.K. Rowling of Harry Potter fame, where she tweeted out a picture of the two boxers and said, "Could any picture sum up our new men's right movement better? The smirk of a male who knows he's protected by a misogynist sporting establishment, enjoying the distress of a woman he's just punched in the head, whose life's ambition he just shattered." And like people just like this exploded. Like, tons of people, because it seemed like another like overt case of sort of the whole discussion of like transgender athletes and with Thomas, like the collegiate swimmer, Leah Thomas, and like, the unfair advantages and, taking, biological males taking over women's sport. And like, again, which isn't a very important conversation. Like
right.
that in itself is not the problem. And like, it just like this is another one, and people were ready to like reach into their pocket and pull out those arguments and like deploy them again and kind
Yeah.
of go through that again. Uh, Except that it seems like things are more complicated, which
As
sometimes that happens.
as often is the case.
That things are, in fact, more complicated than our initial knee jerk in the moment hot take. Because it turns out, and again, the story could be changing. So maybe the details will change. As far as we're recording this and what I've looked up, and sort of as things have come up, that Khalif is not, in fact, transgender or even intersexed. She's kind of said afterwards in an interview, said, I want to tell the entire world I am a female and I will remain a female. And sort of what seems to have come out again, with all the details are somewhat vague, is that she was in fact born a woman. Like she has woman's anatomy. She hasn't taken like she hasn't altered her body to
Right.
transition.
Right.
She wasn't born a male and then like wanted to become a female so that she could have a better chance to win a gold medal. Like that wasn't the case. That no, she was born with female parts. She lived her whole life as a female. She has what I think was called DSD, which is called differences of sexual development, which is when someone like has both of like the XY chromosomes, but like has like the female anatomy, or I think it probably works the other way around, which just sort of makes it a more complicated discussion.
Yeah.
Because it's, not that it's not a discussion.
Right.
But I don't know. It's there's something about this whole thing as it played out, which again, if you've been watching, you know me, you'll know it just sort of rubs me wrong. Like,
Yeah.
like what are some of
Well,
your...
yeah, it is like is when I started seeing those pictures crop up and people getting up in arms about, another example of, transgender sports and just the abuse that women have to endure for this woke nonsense. At this point, I sort of just say, okay, well, I don't know the facts, and before I like decide my opinion about this, like I'm just gonna wait a while, because as things do, like with the Olympic ceremony and with this, it's like there's usually more to the story, and I just think it's a good practice to wait a bit before wading into the discourse. And I mean, I generally don't wade into the discourse except on here. And I think the thing that's interesting about this, it's unfortunate, I think, that people just jump straight to, is this a trans person competing in women's sports, and isn't this horrible? But I think it doesn't negate the fact that the issue, I think, at hand is the benefit of male levels of testosterone through puberty, which gives her that advantage that she would have, even if she took testosterone blocking supplements after puberty. The issue, what I think, when you get down to the nitty gritty of the sports, is if you go through puberty with male levels of testosterone, your body has an unfair advantage over women. And I think that is so clunky to put into a tweet and I think to get across to people, that is just way easier to go with sort of the main talking points of men's and women's spaces and this sort of thing. And so in this case, it's like, okay, maybe she's not a necessarily a man competing in women's spaces. However, she has had the testosterone benefits of being a man competing in women's spaces, and that is the problem. And I don't know what necessarily the solution for that kind of thing is, but it is, I think, better to come at this with a little more understanding and maybe not jump straight into like name calling.
Yeah, because even just like the grace, like again, it's an important question to ask.
Yeah, we need it needs to be figured out, and I think different governing sports bodies have landed in different places, which is why she was like not competing in other sporting events that was governed by not the Olympic Committee, but then she could compete under the Olympic Committee guidelines. So that also just kind of muddies everything up as well.
It clearly gives an advantage, and because I think there's a second boxer that seems similar, for whatever reason hasn't got the same airplay. I think because she wasn't in a J.K. Rowling tweet. So there's sort of like two that seem to have similar conditions, and which seems surprising. Like, hey,
Yeah.
it's a very rare thing, but like in this small committee of elite boxers, two of them, like, but like it doesn't. It's sort of like, do only really tall people like basketball? No, like just the ones that are tall have the advantage. And eventually,
Right.
it's like good old Darwinism at
At
work.
work.
Like, so clearly there is an advantage, but yeah, just the I mean, like almost like the need to jump into like the cultural Christianity, Elon Musk stuff, and like have that discussion and just fit things into our like preconceived boxes of like,
Yeah.
this is an outrage thing that we've gone through many times. So here's an example that seems like it might, like, we don't need to look into it.
Close
but,
enough.
Close enough. Like, why don't we just sort of plug it in, plug and play, and like, where it's like, oh, actually, no, like this is a conversation that we haven't had as much, and it's way more tricky. It's way more ambiguous. Like this, she didn't choose to have that body.
Right.
Like, does that make it fair? Should there be rules? Like, that's a whole conversation.
Right.
But like, just sort of that attacks of like to conflate, like she, and just the use of the language, or, that she is trans, there's different things, and it's, and I think it gets complicated because even like it becomes complicated on even like how we define male and female, like sort of whatever way you come at that. If it's just sort of like, well, it's just sort of testosterone, then like, well, then can you transition if you add just like, is it the body parts? Well, this has a female body part, but it reveals why some of that conversation, like I think there's some very self-obvious things that like aren't complicated,
right?
About some of this. Like then there are some stuff that as Christians, like I don't know, I just feel like the world doesn't need our hot takes as Christians. Like they need us to be like prayerful and thoughtful and like filled with grace and like having those conversations. And again, I don't want to, J.K. Rowling's not speaking on behalf of Christianity. Like, I don't think she believes in God, but like a lot of Christians sort of jumped into like her, fall after her sort of her opinion rather than like, okay, no, like there's more to this. How can we, best respond to this as graceful Christians?
Yeah, and I think that's the tricky thing when you start to outsource your sort of, I guess, thinking to other people that you maybe align with on many things, because you can see someone like J.K. Rowling has this take, and it's like, okay, well, she's been right in the past about stuff, and I've agreed with what she said. And so if you don't really do any research, you can just sort of just fall right into that camp. Or the same with like Elon Musk, like, he said this about the opening ceremony, like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and that confirms all of my priors, so I'm just going to, fall into that camp without really going to scripture, praying about it, thinking for yourself about it, and saying, okay, well, so what is, how should I, as a Christian, reply to these sort of issues, these more complicated cultural moments, and I think, and on both sides, so you see sort of maybe more conservatives, more Christians are sort of jumping in and saying this is totally unfair and all that, which I think there are legitimate points to that. But then on the other side, you see, people just coming in and saying, here's another example of just sort of bigoted conservatives and Christians, dogpiling on, this poor girl for being born this way and just, transphobia or whatever the sort of hot button issues are on the left. And there's so little middle ground there to say we shouldn't be transphobic, but it's not as simple as, shut up and let them box you, transphobe. It's like there is more going on to either one of these camps. And so, but again, that is not conducive to tweeting on X.com. So
yeah, and even just like, the digging your heels in, and like, because like even after some of the facts came out, people that are, just not like changing their tune, but like I feel like part of the problem why these sort of things always bother me is like I feel like the truth doesn't necessarily matter to either side of this. Like,
no,
it doesn't really matter if she is trans or not, because we are fighting this battle over here.
Right.
This fuels it, and like, it doesn't matter if it's clearly unfair, because we're fighting this battle over here, and that's can sort of adjacent to that conversation. And I just feel like Christian, like if no one else in culture is going to do that, like at least Christians should be the ones that are like, what is the truth? Like, what is the truth of the situation? Like, in a verse I tweeted out because it came to mind in response to to this and the opening ceremony, just all these things that have been going on in James 1:19, where it says, "My dear brothers and sisters, understand this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger." And I feel like if there's ever been any verse in the Bible like more ignored in recent years by Christians, it's that one. Like this, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. Like I feel like we like the inverted version of that. Of like, quick to, don't need to listen because I got something to say. And
and I'm angry about it.
I'm angry about it. Like, and I feel like if nothing else with these stories, like again, other conversations that are going to be going on, I think for some time about these sort of issues, like that needs to happen. But like, if nothing else, like as Christians, that verse should be the one that we like.
Yeah.
Hey, am I being quick to listen, or am I just sort of being angry and quick to speak? But one other story, just quickly to touch on about someone that was quick to speak and sparked anger.
Live to regret it.
From people that were listening. Just sort of, again, we talked about two, I think, pretty serious conversations. This one, not so much, but I do think there's some interesting stuff to it. But old Jamie Lee Curtis, who's, sort of like in the Sigourney Weaver tier of like, sort of like, now aging, kind of like, powerful woman actors from back in the day with her horror movies. She has a new movie coming out this week. So she was doing the press tour, and for some reason we had to bring Marvel and everything because people just want to know about Marvel, even if the movie's not Marvel. And in one, again, MTV interview, she always comes with the hard-hitting questions. I was asking like the whole cast, what phase is Marvel in right now? And they're like phases based on the Avengers, and like, hey, I review these movies mostly for a living. Like, I don't know what phase we're in. There's a lot of these movies, but her response, Curtis, she said the phase is bad. A single one-word answer to describe her. Drop that mic. Leave it smoking. And people, they were quick to listen, but not slow to anger in our culture, because apparently she got some people weren't pleased with her for smashing that sacred cow of Marvel, and kind of pushed back on her. So she came out like shortly after that with like a very groveling apology where she says, my comments about Marvel were stupid and I will do better. I've reached out to Kevin Feige and will no longer play in that mudslinging sandbox of competition we call the internet, nor will I engage in the toilet paper promotion or gameplay that is designed for clicks, not content or conversation. To her credit, that is a good quote. Like that, she turned a good phrase, and about, I think we should all stay away from the toilet paper promotion game on the internet. But I thought it was such an interesting, like, I guess in some sense, like it's such a nothing story. Like an actor, such a thing
negative
that some corporate brand was bad, and then people got mad at her, so she like had to apologize and stay in the good graces. Like, who cares? But I do think it is interesting, because I do think it reflects kind of two things. I think one, just how dug in we are as a culture, that like it's just hard to have opinions. Like, again, I don't have like hot take opinions all the time, but like just to have like an honest, thoughtful conversation. Like, hey, I don't like this thing, and here's why. And it's like, how dare you? How dare you not like that thing? The fact that like a disagreement of an opinion, which I think is sort of the second thing, is like just sort of how much these like pop culture things are revered and like this attached to like our identity as people.
Yeah.
Whereas like, does it matter that she's calling out some mega, Disney brand of movies? Like, no, but like for apparently some people, like, because sort of the pop culture becomes part of like our identity, it's like she's insulting, like, it's bad. You like it a lot. So like, you're bad.
Yeah.
Like
you have no taste.
Yeah. You're, and like, so I don't know, like, is there anything to like,
I mean, to me, the surprising thing about this is not that she called it bad, which I think majority maybe of culture would maybe say the same thing. Like, I don't know that there is a majority of people that disagree with what she said. There's just a vocal minority, perhaps, that disagrees with what she said. And to me, the surprising thing was the apology about it. Like, well, it's just odd to me that she would feel the need, which tells me, I don't know, there's something weird going on there, I think, perhaps, that like she would need to give such a groveling apology to Marvel. It's like everyone hates on Marvel because it's Marvel, and it's like just churning out mediocre spectacle after mediocre spectacle, and it's not that interesting anymore. And so it's like, why is she apologizing for that?
You can expect Sam's grovel an apology next week. For
Yeah,
saying
I'll
that
come
about-
back and I should have thought more and
You will
made it
do-
more
will
thoughtful.
You do better?
I will do better. I've done a lot of soul searching, and I'm a better person and a different person than that old me. But yeah, it's just, to me, that's what stands out, is the fact that she felt the need to apologize about having a legitimate opinion about where a franchise is right now. Like, I don't know, that seems really odd. And I think, to your point, I guess there are a lot of people who have very strong feelings about Marvel in a positive direction and are very defensive about any mud that is slung on their beloved Marvel. So
I think it just shows like a level of fear of like, because things are, it's like either we have our conversation just be super emotionally charged and divisive, or we just don't talk about stuff because we don't want it to get
I don't. Yeah, well, it's almost like, maybe she's under consideration for a part or something. To me, that's kind of what it feels like. It's like, well, maybe she's going to be announced as, like, and she probably shouldn't have said that because, the higher ups are like, hey, you're going to play this important role in a couple of years, so maybe take it easy. But I don't know. So that's why, to me, it just seems really, really odd.
Yeah, I guess it's just another example of just it's so hard these days, it seems, just to have conversations about stuff. And
Yeah.
like, hey, and she's obviously like, if you watch the video, like she's like kind of laughing and joking, and like it's the whole thing is played for humor. Like it's a silly question to be asking her anyway. Is like, it's just a nothing moment that becomes this big thing because this person's dousing, putting flames or whatever over something that we care about. But hey, that's what culture is. There's this.
It can be dumb sometimes.
Culture can be dumb, but I do think that is, hey, that is the culture we live in. That is becoming harder and harder to have conversations, either about like silly things like whether Marvel Phase 5, 6 is good or not, or I think even more serious things. But speaking of movies that may be bad or may be good, if we're all going to do better and not call things bad, the next segment of this podcast we have out now and coming soon. So speaking of bad and things that are bad, the movie that is out now, we have all Harold and His Purple Crown, based on the beloved, like, short, simplistic book about childhood imagination and a toddler discovering his, new worlds. We have the, Zachary Levi adult live action blockbuster spectacle.
Daniel, are you telling me that they did not capture the nostalgic magic that you remember when you used to read Harold and the Purple Crown?
Well, like I was in the theater thinking, like, wait a minute, like, Harold's a baby, and he's a cartoon. Like, Zachary Levi is not a baby, and he looks real. Something about this is getting lost in translation.
Something's changed.
So this movie, it's not good. And I wish I brought my kids, because again, a lot of kids' movies aren't good. Kids don't care if they're good; they just think it's funny if there's like poop drop or something. Like I don't know, but part of why I don't even think my 9-year-olds would be like, they might not like dislike it as much as I did, but like it's one to skip. And I haven't seen the box office. I'm guessing a lot of people didn't need me to tell them to sit this one out. But hey, if you want to go see it,
not a lot of fence riders on that one, I guess.
It is out there if you need to watch something, and it is relatively safe for kids. So go check that out. But as we mentioned, Jamie Lee Curtis has a new movie coming out, kind of the big movie this week, which I totally forgot about. I got my schedule mixed up. Borderlands. I don't know if are you familiar with this at all?
I don't think I am.
Based on a video game, I believe.
Oh, good.
Like it looks wild. Like it's this very like over the top. Like the characters all look like they're pulled out of like Fortnite or something. And like
is
one
this
like a bunny?
Is this sort of like because I feel like maybe I saw something about this kind of trying to be what is that Marvel movie with Chris Pratt?
Oh, like Guardians
of the Galaxy.
Like
is it?
That's what it looks like. And again,
Okay.
it's based on like a video game, so like it's been around.
It's not that, bro. It's its own thing.
But I don't know. Like, I feel like I've heard nothing, like no discussion about this movie, and it's coming out.
Which is
in, like, a couple
typically.
days. I don't think the reviews have been released, which is usually a bad sign. If it's like, we don't want people to know what the critics think. But if you do want to know what the critics think, I'll be seeing that in just, the day this episode drops, I will have seen it. So stay tuned this weekend for my review. And hey, if nothing else, it's probably better than Herald in the Purple Crown. So hey, there's always that going for it. But something that always is better than my wildest, highest expectations is the final segment of this podcast episode. We have things we like that you should like too.
So it should come as no surprise that the thing I like this week is the Olympics, and by that I mean all of it. I'm here for all of it. I watch as much of it as I can, and it's really amazing for like the drama, I think, of the Olympics is what's so great. The hair's breadth of difference between gold and silver, like we saw in the men's 100-meter dash. The one of the Olympic beach volleyball teams parting ways with their coach, mid Olympics and going a different strategic direction. And just all of the blood, sweat, and tears that go into making the games great. And I think that's what it's about. It's about the competition. It's about, leaving it all on the court, on the field, on the line, whatever you may have, and the unavoidable comments that the commentators make about all of the shot put throwers, I think it makes the games great, and I think that's why so many people tune in, and that is what I love this week, and I know it is what you love as well.
So I'm already, again, we're recording this on a Tuesday, so like when this episode drops, the Olympics will be, and it's like last, I think, official day of like before the closing ceremonies. Like,
yeah,
I'm already starting to feel a little sad.
I know.
There's always that like post-Olympic depression. That's
I know it is.
Like, oh, grab our food. Like my whole family would be like eating like dinner on the couch. And
we eat like every meal on the couch.
And, like,
yeah,
watching
totally.
these events, and it is like, to me, the Olympics are just all about like human perseverance. Like it's just, do I care about half these sports? Will I care about them next week? Like, nope.
Probably not.
Well, in LA or wherever the next Summer Olympics are, but it's just that like there's something inspirational about like the humans that have pushed themselves so far, overcome so many things to just reach that level of like discipline. And I won't lie, I've been getting up earlier lately.
Yeah.
I've been exercising almost every day, sometimes twice a day.
Yeah. I was on the rower some this week, so I was, thinking about those Olympic rowers and how easy this is. Like,
the LA Olympic, you already got your eyes set on me.
Look for me. I'll be appearing, doing something probably
as a humble podcast host.
And there he is, sweeping up the trash in the grandstands.
But they are the best, and
they really are.
They're spaced out enough. I know, again, maybe 2 years, but like summer before and winter before.
Yeah.
That like they always feel special.
Yeah.
Even though I feel like they come more frequently than I seem to remember. Like every 2 years isn't that far.
Yeah.
But
2 years as a kid is way longer than 2 years as a 30-something.
Like my kids they didn't even remember the last Olympics. I think now that I cooked on it.
Yeah.
So, hey, culture's bad, but the Olympics are good. So at least go appreciate that. Except for all the stuff in the Olympics that are bad.
Yeah.
And that make us mad.
Just
ignore
the
that
games,
stuff.
the games.
Focus on the good stuff.
Games.
Focus on the positives. One of the things that we hope is good is this podcast and you joining us every week, every Thursday. Again, encourage you guys just to join the conversation, send us comments. Let us know if there's anything you see that you want us to talk about, dig into. Just love having these sort of conversations. So we hope we will see you next week for more conversations on faith and pop culture.